Well, hello and welcome back. Now, politicians in Scotland will start voting today on the controversial gender recognition reform bill, which will make it easier for people to self-declare as their chosen gender.
Supporters and opponents of the bill are making their voices heard today ahead of tomorrow's final vote.
Well, joining us now live is the trans activist and host of the Gender Nebulous podcast, Frida Wallace, and also the director of Women Scotland, Susan Smith. Ladies, very warm welcome. Frida, just to tell us a little bit more about what's going on north of the border today politically around this bill.
Well, politically, north of the border, what seems to be a weaponised performative argument that seeks to demonise trans people. And it seems to be coming from a very, very specific part. Because to me, the whole thing is, it's based on political leverage, and trans people are being used in that debate. So what they don't like really is Nicola Sturgeon. And the thing that's really in transition is Scotland itself. It's transitioning to a more progressive Scotland. It's transitioning to an independent Scotland. It's self-actualising in the same way trans women do. And some people, some conservatives in Whitehall don't like that. So what they'll do is they'll weaponise this debate. They'll make it about women's rights when it really isn't. They'll use lobbyists and they'll use the kind of people that come onto this very TV station and try and weaponise and demonise trans women, as I've seen Kev do many times on this station. And that's how it works. It's got nothing to do with helping women. And it's got nothing to do with, it helps trans people in the sense that it stops me having to fill in so many forms. That's all it does. I self-ID now. I don't need to be rubber stamped by the government to be who I am. I am who I am now. And nobody's checking my paperwork when I use single-sex spaces. It's just social politeness, and it's to do with modesty. I'm no threat to anybody.
Nobody said you were, Frida, but I think that what critics of the gender recognition reform bill say that it will make it too easy for younger people who are perhaps confused to make life-changing decisions that will alter the rest of their existence, perhaps at a too young an age. So that to make this too easy is possibly not beneficial for a lot of young people. That's the criticism.
Well, the thing is with that, if you was to go to a gender clinic now, say you were as young as 12, you would be 15, 16 years old by the time you even got seen by a psychiatrist. And that's before you have any medical intervention whatsoever. Even if you had medical intervention, there would be no surgery unless you went private, which is prohibitively expensive. So you would have to have both parents on board. You would have to have legal support, and it would never happen. And in this country at the moment, there is no support for anybody under 16 anyway. So that is a misnomer.
Let me bring Susan. Susan, Frida has said that the only people who are opposed to this are people like Kevin, as Frida said, and
apparently
people, south of the border, a bunch of conservatives, Frida said. And Frida also said it's got nothing to do with women's rights.
I mean, that's an absolute load of nonsense. I'm not sure that either J.K. Rowling or Joanna Cherry can be described as conservatives. And considering that this has sparked the biggest
socially conservative
ever in the SNP, then that's clearly not true. I mean, this is heavily opposed in Scotland. The majority of Scots do not want this. This has got nothing to do with wider issues. And the fact is, it's quite clear that Frida's losing the debate because it has to go down this really silly path. The basic fact is...
Can you explain the silly path to me?
Excuse me, I am speaking now. The basic fact of the matter is people cannot change sex, and that people who are male are consistently a threat to women. It doesn't matter about their identity. It doesn't mean not all men, etc., etc., not all trans people, obviously, but we measure that threat based on their sex, not on what they feel about their clothing preference or the pronoun preference.
So, but Susan, explain to people why you think this legislation does formulate a threat.
Because it opens up a process to anybody. And right now, at this moment, some amendments are being debated in the chamber, and these amendments are about stopping people who are convicted of really serious sex offences being allowed to take advantage of this system. And the fact is, the Scottish Government and the Green Party are not even prepared to stop sex offenders awaiting trial, changing their sex, and then presumably trying to leverage themselves into a women's prison. That is why women's rights activists are rightly
That's a complete
concerned.
nonsense, and you know it is.
That is why the UN Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women and Girls said it opens the door. And it's not a nonsense, because that is what is happening.
It's absolutely a nonsense, and I'll tell you why it's a nonsense. The women who fought for women's rights in the 19th century didn't fight on the basis of sex definitions. They understood that the oppression was societal. They understood that it was societal and economic and political.
Susan, let Frida finish. She let you finish.
They knew it was their identity as women, as effective members of society, which was important. It wasn't bodily function and to do with the body. They wanted to be liberated from their bodies, not be defined by them. Sex doesn't matter, gender matters, because that's the social world we live in. We live in a world of gendered language, and that's how we communicate with each other.
Frida, we haven't got much time. I need you to address what Susan, just 1 minute. I just want, Susan, please, just... Frida, I want you to address what Susan was just explaining, saying that it's being debated whether or not people who are accused of sex crimes can change their gender.
If you're in a prison, you lose your rights. Having a GRC wouldn't change that. It's to do with risk assessment. And prison governors, people that work in prisons, try to work hard to reduce. Now, you're going to get mistakes, and you're going to get instances where that goes wrong. But there is the GRC. Would
that be like the mistake they made with the prisoner who was in a male prison?
White. You're going to mention Karen White, aren't you?
Yes, who went to
because it's the only one you can think of.
Who went on to rape two of the inmates.
No, she didn't rape. She sexually assaulted, but that doesn't make it any better. But that was the Daily Mail article, wasn't it?
Oh, so if it's in the Daily Mail, it doesn't count. Is that right?
No, I'm saying that's the only.
So that's the kind of awful mistake that we need to avoid, isn't it, Frida?
No, it's not.
No, we don't need to avoid it. Let it carry on happening, shall we?
Kevin, you have platformed Carrie J. Keane on this TV station.
Don't start that. We're not here to interrogate me about who I have on my shows. So thanks very much for that.
Yes, we are, Kev.
No, we're not, actually. It's not your show, Frida.
But do you know what, Kev?
Susan, we do have to worry. It is a problem, is it not, if we make it too easy for very young people to self-identify, just say, I want to identify as a woman, and they might make decisions that will affect the rest of their lives. That is what we have to guard against, and that's possibly the problem with this bill.
Yeah, and I would urge anybody to go back and listen. They've just discussed the amendments on the age limit, and they were defeated, of course. And there was a great speech by several MSPs, and Kenny Gibson spoke at great length about detransitioners and the evidence that was given in Parliament by Sinead Watson. Just the really terrible things that these young people have gone through, and how they have not had adequate psychological counselling, and they've been set on this path with no way back. And what we are seeing now is this 4,000% increase in girls being. And obviously the Hilary Cass review has led to the Tavistock closing down. This isn't happening in Scotland. We are so behind the curve on this. We know that countries like Sweden, Finland, France are now moving to stop puberty blockers, and we are going full steam ahead. And as was said in the debate today, what clinicians are worried about is that if somebody, a child, because these people are still children, turn up at the GP with a certificate saying I have now changed my legal sex, they will then be wanting to go on to take medication, because that is the experience in countries such as Denmark.
Susan, we have run out of time, but I'm aware that, Susan, you've had more airtime than Frida has. Frida, you were shaking your head then. As briefly as you can, just because of the time limits, give us your response to what Susan said.
Well, I think what would help those children that have got gender dysphoria and they've got psychological problems, whatever you want to call it. It would be better if we helped them. We didn't amplify and weaponize the views of trans hostile lobbyists from Whitehall who seek to influence votes, use fear-mongering narratives and scare ordinary people into talking some nonsense. And that would be nice, you know, just to understand those children. Merry Christmas.
Thanks, Frida Wallace. And I'll make sure next time I book a guest for my show, I get your approval first. And thank you very much, Susan Smith, Director for Women in Scotland. Up next, after a racism